that, I wanted to say hello to Josh from Visto.ai. How you doing, Josh?
I'm doing well, Craig. Thanks for having me, and you got to have me back for one of those four-person discussions one night because that looks like a lot of fun too.
Yeah, I'm hoping this is going to be a regular thing, maybe every couple of weeks, depending on how easy it is to get. It's managing people's schedules that's the hardest part. But I'm
Mhm.
hoping that it can make it a regular thing because I think it's going to be fun, and I'm really looking forward to that one.
For
And
sure.
uh, we get pretty heated sometimes because there's different sides of the debate. Will is a pitch coach. I'm a pitch coach. When we're mentoring people, I say, "Oh, you should do this," and he goes, "I disagree. It should be this way." And it's great because honestly, the entrepreneur needs to do what works for them, and having all the different opinions and um, uh, seeing all the different sides rather than just one side is really helpful. I found so.
For sure.
Oh, we're getting a lot of great questions here already. So why don't you start sharing your presentation, and I'll just mention to everyone we want all your questions today. Thank you for coming today. We have a nice audience. We want all your questions, so throw them in the chat room, throw them in your Q&A window. We're talking about the startup visa program today, but Josh is gonna talk about all the other stuff he does around immigration. So if you have other questions around that, please do that. We're leaving a lot of time for the Q&A window, so we want your questions. So over to you, Josh.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Craig. And yeah, I'll quickly mention, folks, if you do have questions, ideally throw them in the Q&A tab. The other thing that does is it allows other people to see them, I think, and they can upvote. So at the end of the presentation, I can find the ones, start from the top and I'll work my way down. But anyways, let us jump right into the presentation. As Craig says, it won't be very long. It will hopefully be very helpful, but we're going to leave a lot of time for Q&A at the end. Really quickly, I'll tell you a little bit about who I am. I'll talk very briefly about why Canada. Most of you, some of you might already be living in Canada. Most of you are probably already convinced about Canada, but I'll mention as it relates to this visa. I'm going to go in depth on the startup visa requirements. Luckily, they're actually not overly complex, especially as compared to some other applications. So that won't take us too long. And then, of course, a live Q&A at the end. I'll talk any questions about the startup visa or a variety of other visas as well. So really quickly, my name is Josh Schachnow. I'm a Canadian immigration lawyer. I was born and raised in Ottawa, Ontario. I'm now based out of Toronto, Ontario. I did my BCom at Carleton University back home in Ottawa. I got my law degree at Western University, that's based out of London, Ontario. And I am now also the CEO at Visto.ai. We are a free immigration platform that helps international students and skilled workers and startup founders through the Canadian immigration process. I'll talk a little bit about that at the end. Let's get into this fun stuff though first before we get into that. So why the startup visa? There's many reasons. Most of you are probably here. You don't need too much convincing about it, but there is a booming tech economy here in Canada these days, especially in Toronto, in the likes of Vancouver, in the likes of Montreal. Toronto has added something like more jobs than New York and Silicon Valley combined in the tech space in the last year or two, which is really crazy if you think about that. Great standard of living in Canada in a variety of ways, just safe, healthy, all that kind of stuff, as well as things like healthcare, good education systems, world-renowned universities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. As well, the startup visa is a smooth pathway to PR because it actually is a PR application. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But the startup visa, instead of, for example, coming on a study permit, coming on a visitor visa, coming on the work permit, this is actually a pathway right to permanent residence. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But obviously, coming as PR is a great way to start in any country. So with that being said, let's talk about the visa itself and the specific requirements. Firstly, you need what's called a qualifying business, and I'm going to break down exactly what a qualifying business is in just a second. This is kind of an overview. A letter of support, this is from a designated organization. Again, I'll break that down in more details. You will need language exams. I can hear some groaning already from the chat just from mentioning that. I'll get into exactly what is required from those. And proof of financial support. And again, I'm going to break down numbers. We're going to go into details. These are kind of what I'll call the four major pillars in terms of requirements. that I'm going to go into more detail on, and then I'll throw in some extras at the end that you should know. So first of all, what is a qualifying business? So think of it as being two steps to this process. Number one, you have to get a support letter, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second. You hopefully will get a support letter, then you submit your PR application. That's really it. But in terms of what is a qualifying business, you have to think about it when you're in step one, when you're getting this support letter from a designated entity. You can have up to 5 founders to include in this startup visa application, but each founder must have more than 10% voting rights in the company. So if you're a founder right now, you're hoping to, apply through the startup visa, you and any other founders that are hoping to come to Canada must have more than 10% voting rights in the company. And as well, when you get that support letter from a designated entity, all of the founders and that entity must hold more than 50% of the voting rights total, right? So you could have 15%, another founder has 15%, but if there's, let's say, another outside investor from your home country who owns more than 50% of the voting rights, you will not qualify, in this case, as a qualifying business. The other thing you want to keep in mind is that when you are then approved for PR, you have to meet the following requirements. The first one being ongoing management in Canada. So you actually have to go to Canada and start managing the company there, obviously, as well as you have to incorporate in Canada. And lastly, there need to be what are deemed essential operations in Canada. These are kind of the 3 requirements for when you actually get approved for permanent residence. So you are going to have to incorporate in Canada. I'm not a corporate lawyer, so I won't go into too much detail on how you want to structure that, but you're also going to need some management in the country, and you're going to have essential operations in Canada. So you can't open up like a tiny little division in Canada that isn't really doing anything essential for the company. All right, so this is in terms of what needs to be in place for your business, your corporation. Let's talk about the letter of support. This is probably the most important part of the application because it's really what you need to start. So as I mentioned in those 2 steps, number 1, get letter of support. Number 2, submit application. You cannot do number 2 without number 1. So the letter of support is kind of the make or break in this situation. Now, the important part of the letter of support is you can only get it from certain entities. And they are either going to be a designated business incubator, so something like Mars or DMZ. I'll get to the list in just a second here. An angel group. So these are angel investors that form a group. There's multiple of them across Canada, or a venture fund. So again, group of, VC fund that invests in tech companies usually. Now they have to be designated. So what does that mean? There's a list of these designated groups. So which companies fall under which. The link is here. Obviously you know what? I think I can just copy this. Let me see if I can just post it in the chat right now. Oh, I can. So I'm posting a link in the chat. That is the list of all the designated entities separated by incubator, angel group, venture fund. And it has a little bit more information there. So the absolute key to getting this thing started, this application started, is getting a letter of support. So look into the different incubators, angel groups, venture funds, talk to Craig. We're going to be working a little bit more closely on this as well. Maybe we'll talk about it at the end. Getting the letter of support is kind of the lifeblood of this application. Okay, language exams, the fun stuff. So as part of your PR application, before you submit it, you will have to write a language exam, I'm sorry to say. It can be done in either English or French. I'm assuming probably most people here would prefer English, but I'll mention all the exams anyways. There are only 4 exams that are accepted right now for PR applications. They are listed right here, the IELTS, the CELPIP. Those are both in English. The IELTS is handwritten. The CELPIP is online on a computer. You still have to attend in person, but it's done on a computer. The TEF and the TCF are both French language exams. And what you need to get is a CLB 5. So that is the overall score you need to get for writing the exam. To be honest, CLB 5 is not too hard. So to give you an example, the skilled worker requirements for PR, typically you need a CLB 7. So the standard is a little bit lower for the startup visa, which is a good thing. Proof of financial support. So just because you have support from any of those entities, that does not mean that you could support yourself per se, and or especially your family. So as part of the PR application, they require you to show you have a certain amount of funds to support the move and settlement in Canada. Now, the number here is, if you are applying by yourself without family, the number you need, and this is a random number, but this is what the government tells us based on certain calculations, is $12,960. And the reason why I put plus is because if you have additional family members, it is more. So in this application, you can include a spouse or a common law partner. So if you're married or you've been living with your partner for more than 12 months consecutively, or dependent children. So if you have children that are 22 years old or younger and they want to come with you, they can come with you as well. What you want to keep in mind is that for every additional family member you include, you're adding about $3,000 or $4,000 to this proof of support number. So if you're bringing one family member, it's going to bump up to around 16, 17,000. If you're bringing a spouse and a kid, it's going to bump up closer to around the low $20,000 range. Now, another important thing to keep in mind here is that you can't go take out a loan for $12,960 from your bank, right? These have to be unencumbered funds sitting in something like a bank account. You have to prove them with documentation. There can't be any payback requirements on them. We can talk about that if there's any questions about it. For example, you can take gifts from a family member or a friend if they're willing to, for example, write an affidavit saying this is a gift. I'm not requiring to be paid back by this person, but you cannot just go kind of take out a loan to cover this requirement. Other documents. So what are some other things that you will have to include in your application? Those are the big four, we'll call them. Some other things you'll also likely have to include. So forms, you're gonna have to fill out, it's probably about 5 or 6 forms. Again, it depends how many family members you're bringing, if there's certain other conditions that apply, but you'll have to fill out a few immigration forms. You will have to include copies of your passports and maybe other IDs, at the very least your passports. You'll likely need a police check. You may need a medical exam. This kind of depends on what country you're coming from. That's a spelling mistake, should say depending on country, you may need a police check and or medical exam. I'm a stickler for spelling, so I'm gonna have to change that right after this ends. Family documents. So for example, if you're bringing a spouse, you'll need a marriage certificate. If you're bringing kids, you'll need birth certificates, et cetera, et cetera. You'd also have to fill out forms for each of your family members as well. In terms of processing times, the PR application is on the longer side in terms of processing. I'm going to tell you about a solution in just a second, but the average processing time for the PR application is between 12 to 16 months. Not a fun amount of time, but the good thing is that if you do get that letter of support, they will allow you to apply for a work permit in the meantime. And a work permit would allow you to, if you're outside of Canada, or maybe your permit is expiring from inside of Canada, you can come to or stay in Canada, start working on the business while the PR is processing. So that's really important, right? Because it means you can apply tomorrow. You won't have PR for 12 to 16 months, most likely. But if you're outside of Canada, for example, you may be able to get your work permit approved in 2-3 months and come to Canada and get started, which is obviously a good thing. Now let's talk about more money, the government filing fees. So this is what's required when you submit your application. So the entire startup visa fee, the government filing fee that you have to pay is $2,075. That's per applicant, right? So if you have 4 founders, each founder is going to have to prepare this application and submit their own fee. So $2,075 for you. If you are including your spouse, it's another $1,325. If you're including a child, it is another $225 per child. And then we have what's called biometrics. For those in Canada, you may or may not have to give biometrics if you've given them before. For those outside of Canada, there is a probably 96.7% chance you'll have to give biometrics. That's an $85 fee if you're applying alone. If you're including any family members, it's $170 total. COVID circumstances. Couldn't get through a presentation without talking about the elephant in the room. So Immigration Canada is still processing all applications. Most of them, I should say. Certain visitor visa applications may not be processed. But what's important to know is that everything's still being processed. Some people may or may not be allowed to travel right now. So, for example, if you get that work permit, you can be allowed to travel if you fall under what Canada deems an essential traveler or an essential worker. There's 10 industries Immigration Canada designates as what they deem to be essential. It's actually quite broad. So there's probably a good chance that you could come on a work permit. However, PR approvals after March 18th are currently not allowed to travel. Now, the good thing here is that you're going to have to wait 12 to 16 months anyways. By that time, hopefully the travel restrictions are lifted. If not, the world might not be looking too good, but you'll hopefully be able to get a work permit before then anyways, which could be exempt from the travel restrictions. Expect delays. This is what IRCC Immigration Canada has told us from, day one of COVID, which is they are also working from home. They are short-staffed. They are the government. And so they're working a little bit slower than usual, as you can imagine. The good thing is that the startup visa has a bit of its own kind of like processing group. And so as long as that processing group isn't backlogged, you may not see delays. You may not. But I would expect delays and budget for delays anyways. So that's pretty much it in terms of requirements and the gist of the process. The last thing I'll actually quickly mention is it's a paper-based application. So you will fill out these forms, you will get all these documents, you will print them out with real paper, you will stick them in a real envelope, and you will actually mail them to Immigration Canada. Lastly, just want to take a minute to tell you a little bit about Visto if you want more help with the startup visa or other parts of immigration, because of course it can be confusing, it can be expensive. I just mentioned the government fees, that wouldn't even count legal fees if you work with a professional. So Visto.ai, it's a free platform, and we help with the following immigration applications: the study permit, the work permit, express entry, aka permanent residence for skilled workers. So if you're not a founder, express entry might actually be a better PR option for you, and the startup visa. So we have guides for all four of those in the platform that you can access totally for free. And then we have additional services. If you want to talk to a lawyer, if you want to talk to me, you can book a call with me right in the platform. If you want career help, if you want, tips on how to find jobs, tips on how to study for the language exam, you can find all of that for free in the portal. Here's a little picture of how it looks. Pretty much a portal, pretty portally. You'll see my face a lot. There's a lot of video content as well. We talk not just about immigration, but how to find jobs, how to settle, all that good stuff. So I recommend signing up. I'm biased, but it's totally for free. So that's it for the presentation. Thanks very much for listening. I see we have more than a few questions piled up here.
Yeah, before we get to those, I want to keep them coming. Sorry, I got a few things to add, but keep going before we get to the questions.
Yeah, no, this was it. Just want to say, if you like what you heard, if you're interested in Canada, doesn't even have to be the startup visa, check us out at Visto.ai. We also have a great Facebook group. I go live every Sunday. I do updates on immigration. I answer questions, and I'm going to be sticking around here for the next 33 minutes, if that's how long it takes to answer some more.
Yeah, and I reached out when I knew we were doing this. I reached out to a couple of people, as I mentioned, Josh. They couldn't join us today, but they sent me some notes on what you can expect. People being specifically incubators and accelerator programs and what they look for when you're applying to them to get that startup visa letter and to apply for their program. Just thought this might be helpful. So for the startup visa program, they want to make sure, just like Josh was saying, that they have an established revenue model, like that so annual revenue model for this specific one, totals can fall between 100K to 1 million with good margins depending on the incubator. So this is what they're looking for, what you're doing, your business back home. And then your business model needs to be airtight. So, they do an initial screening followed by a panel interview, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this specifically. This incubator, they do applications. They start at the 1st of September. Potential startups submit their business plan and financials for initial screening. These applications are pass or fail, and mentors dictate whether or not they move on forward. So, you get one kick at that can, or before to move to the next round. Mentors are people who volunteer their time with the incubator. Sometimes people like me. They can be industry experts, working professionals, or anyone affiliated with the startup. We have a bunch of mentors in the community that help. This stage is relatively light. Mainly look at revenue growth within the company as well as early profits. Declining year over year revenues would be a red flag and it would decline an initial application. Successful applicants get moved to the next phase. So keep those types of things in mind, and hopefully this information is helpful. So the next step is the panel interviews. So after a startup passes the initial screening process, they are invited to a panel interview. In the process, each startup will have 3 panel interviews with 3 separate mentors. Startups share detailed financial plans, business model, and supporting material around their business. Each panel interview is 30 minutes in length, and the startups essentially pitch their business to the panelists. Panelists tend to ask detailed questions around projected financials, industry adoption, competitors, and why they think their business will succeed in North American marketplace. There's no set number on the number of startups that can pass this phase, but 2 out of 3 mentors need to assign a passing grade. So you do this to 3 in front of 3 mentors. 2 or 3 need to give you a passing grade for you to move on. So mentors are interviewed separately and are not in communication with one another during the phase. So you interview with them separately, and it's not a group interview. And then if 2 of the 3 approve you, you go on to the final phase where all successful startups conduct a final interview with the incubator lead. And we don't know 100% what kind of questions they'll ask, but it's assuming it'll be similar to the ones I mentioned up before. And it depends how many spots are available. How many, what your competition looks like. So I just wanted to kind of give you a feel for that process, so you know what you're up against. And I noticed someone here had said how much it costs. Yeah, looking around, I see, these programs are between, looks like $20,000 and $50,000 from the incubator accelerator program, depending where you're going. So and those are mostly U.S. So keep that in mind. And I think they charge so much because they want to make sure you can afford it, and that you're financially stable to answer all the questions above. I don't know if that was helpful for you at all, Josh, but
Yeah, no, super helpful. I mean, another reason is they can, right? There's gatekeepers here, right? That list of designated organizations are effectively gatekeepers to submitting your application. Now, hopefully they're doing it for the right reasons. They're providing good support. They're running good programs. But yeah, it's far and away the biggest part of this whole process. If you can't get the letter of support, then there's nothing else to do. So yeah, that's super helpful.
did you have a chance to look over any of these questions?
Oh yeah, no, I'm ready to go through all of them.
All right, let's go.
Okay, I'm going to go in order from the Q&A tab. So if you've
All
been
right.
posting in chat, then ideally throw your stuff in the Q&A tab. Otherwise, I'll get to it after the Q&A questions. But JZA says, is there like a quota that the Canadian government might deny your request due to over quota? What is the history of filling that quota? It's a good question, JZA. I don't know if there's a quota per se, but I have heard a few things anecdotally. So number one, from a statistic point of view, in 2019, and these are numbers directly from Immigration Canada, in 2019, they only received 280 applications for the whole year. So that's a very small amount. I don't know what percentage of that they approved, but that's the amount that they processed. So it's a very small amount, right? 280 is what, like 20, 30 a month, right? It's not that many. So I don't think they're near their quota right now. But again, the key is getting that letter of support first to give yourself a chance to even submit the application. Okay, Amika says, hi guys, do we get the slides after the presentation? I can send these, I can shoot the PDF over to you if you want, Craig, if you want to circulate.
Actually, what I'm going to do, I think everyone here will be fine with me. I'm going to share the list of everyone who registered with you after so that you can send them directly.
Sure, that works as well. Okay, Jaspreet, there are different categories in IELTS. Which type of exam? Yeah, so Jaspreet, it's a good question. So you got to write the general IELTS exam, right? So there's general and academic. Academic is for those who want to come study. So you definitely want to take the general IELTS. Mauricio says, you mentioned that founders have to have 50 plus control in the company. You meant the founders going to Canada must have 50 plus shares or some of the founders? Yeah, so that's a good question, Mauricio. So it's the founders who are applying, so the ones who are applying to want to come to Canada, plus the designated entity, right? Because some of those organizations may take equity in the company. So the hard requirement is the founders who want to move to Canada through the startup visa application, plus the designated entity that's providing the letter of support, combined must own 50% or more of the voting rights. It's a good question, though. JZA says, what step of the cycle you should be at least in? Would you have to be in the market or can still be an incubation stage? It's a good question. I mean, from the sounds of what Greg was saying, well, it kind of depends, right? Because if you're going to go the incubator route, Craig just talked about what they're looking for, right? They need to see revenue, they need to see certain numbers. You could also get a letter of support from an angel group or a venture fund, but they're still going to have hard requirements too, right? They might not require you to have, 100 grand in revenue, but you're going to need some semblance of strong traction. And I know this because I just tried to raise some money in Canada. You're going to need some semblance of traction and revenue to get a letter of support from any of those three types of entities.
And the other thing, the criteria they kind of look at is that there's a technology component to the company, that you have the intellectual property, that you're financially stable, that the team is coachable, that obviously you're coming to Canada, and you have a high level proficiency of English, like we mentioned before. So they're all looking for that kind of stuff.
For sure. Okay, anonymous attendee says, if someone is looking to do a PhD, can IELTS be waived by Canada universities if a STEM type master's? Um, so if you're looking to do a PhD, so you don't actually need IELTS for a study permit application unless you're coming through the student direct stream, but you may need IELTS to get into the PhD program. So that depends on the program, so the school or the university that you're applying to. But if you're applying from the US for a study permit, IELTS is not actually a requirement for the study permit visa. It'll depend on the school, the college, or the university. And I should add, if you guys do have questions on any of what I just mentioned here, so the study permit, work permit, or express entry, I can also take questions on all of those as well. Okay, Emeka says, does the business need to serve Canadians in terms of the product service? Also, please elaborate on the possibility of getting a work permit while applying for the visa. Yeah, so it's a good question, Emeka. I mean, in terms of the hard requirements, no. Like, for example, maybe you're coming to Canada, you're opening up a tech company, but you're primarily targeting the US market, then that will be okay. The question really is going to be, kind of what's expected from the incubators and the VCs and stuff in and of itself. And then also, more importantly, are you doing essential functions in Canada, right? So is your main office in the US and you're not actually doing much in Canada? You're kind of just like using PR to get a few people into Canada because they want to live in Canada. But I don't believe it's a hard requirement that you have to service Canadians. What they're more interested in is that you'll be hiring Canadians, right? Again, this is not a hard requirement, but what they're hoping for is you set up your business in Canada and now, you continue to do well, you raise more money, you make more money, you're hiring Canadians, you're creating jobs. Okay, and the possibility of getting a work permit. So if you get the letter of support, you can submit the work permit application basically at the same time that you submit the PR application. So that comes down to, again, getting the letter of support, and the letter of support must check the box saying that you can apply for a work permit. So that just depends on the entity giving you the thumbs up. And then you submit a separate work permit application. So it's pretty straightforward. Most of the documents will be the exact same. The possibility is strong, assuming you submit a good application, fill out all the right forms, include the right paperwork, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, Anis says, can you help to accept my business plan and startup idea with any incubator? So I cannot, but the man who sits below me on Zoom right now might be able to.
Yeah. Well, we can't help you get accepted. We can review it and make sure that it's ready to go. because we don't know what competition you have in that particular round. They only accept 10, 20, 30 people in that particular accelerator program and stuff, but we can get you ready. So contact me afterwards. I'll put some contact information in the chat room so you can reach out to me and we can have a quick chat and see if I can help. I wanted to bring in one question I saw in the chat room from my friend Stuart Brown, and he was asking, what is the risk that the startup visa program will be canceled in the future?
Well, it's a good question. It's been around for, I think, almost 10 years now. I think it started in 2012, I want to say. So it's been around quite some time. The numbers have been going up in the last few years in terms of number of applications. So it's very hard for me to say, Stuart. I don't know, right? Because until Immigration Canada decides to cancel it, then it's kind of up to them. I will say, in terms of the numbers from the last 3 years, it's looking like it's doing well. And so, usually, when the numbers start going up, that's a good sign that the program is here to stay. Right? It's no longer in pilot phase. So, as far as I know, it's here to stay for the time being.
Hey, Stuart, I just have another question for you. I don't know, people probably don't know who Stuart is, but he happens to be CEO of PiCap Venture Partners. Um, and did you want to say a few words on what a VC might look for when it comes to investing in a startup that's coming to Canada from a startup visa program? I'll leave that with you for a bit if you wanted to jump on, and we'll move to the next question here. What is it?
So Bob's asking, can you apply for this startup visa if you are living in Canada? I'm currently on my study permit. Yeah. So Bob, there's nothing not allowing you to apply while you're in Canada. So you definitely can, and especially if you're currently on your study permit, once you graduate, you can get your post grad work permit, and you can start working on it right away there as well. If you don't decide to go the startup visa work permit route, if you're graduating soon, if you need help with the post grad work permit, so that's the permit that international students can get when they graduate in Canada. We have a guide on that as well in the Visto portal. Okay, and he says, if I apply for a work permit on a startup visa and came to Canada, then for PR, I have to apply separately. Yes, so they are two completely separate applications. So you would submit one application for PR, then you would submit one application for the work permit. And it looks like we
Great.
might have a guest.
Yeah, I've asked Stuart to join us. I'm not sure if his mic is on right now. He mentioned, I mentioned who he was, but he's also joined NACO's panelists that review and approves the startup visa applications. So, are you here, Stuart?
Yeah, I'm talking. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, yeah, we can hear you. Can you tell us a little bit about what you and the panel look for when you're reviewing them?
Yeah, for sure. So the main thing that we want to see when companies are applying is that the company has a proven business model so that when it arrives in Canada, the chances of it succeeding are a lot higher than if it's just an idea that has no traction. So if you're able to package your application in such a way that highlights the success you've had in your home country, that would speak volumes in terms of the potential in Canada. And that doesn't always necessarily have to be generating revenue and sales. It could be just pilot projects you're running, how many users you have on your platform, and other things to kind of show that your business model is more solidified than it would be if you just had a general idea.
I really appreciate you hopping on the mic and letting us know. Did you have any questions for him, Josh?
No, I mean, it's super interesting to know. Stuart, have you guys seen an uptick in the last few years in terms of, we'll call it like serious applications, or how have you felt the program has been going for the last couple of years?
So in addition to being on the panel at NACO, which I just started a few months ago, to be honest, I've been an advisor with an incubator called TBDC, the Toronto Business Development Center. So I'm a part of the screening process there as well. And I've definitely seen a massive uptick over the past few years. They've literally been getting me to interview companies every 2 to 3 weeks. And
Right.
so And so we're on the final end of the application process. So what TVDC does is they get mentors slash advisors like myself to be the final people to do a Zoom video interview with the company and then give our recommendation whether they should be let into the program or not and get that support letter that you're talking about.
Got it. It's good to hear because I can look up the immigration numbers, but it's really good to know, you know, the step before the immigration application. You know, how are the numbers? What's the volume looking like from the letter of support stage? So appreciate that insight.
No problem. Yeah, well, you and I can connect next week or something like that if you want to continue the conversation. And Craig, if any of the attendees want to reach out to me for some more insight, I'd be happy to offer that.
Yeah, I just put your email in the chat room so people can do that. So now that they know who you are, and I'll connect Josh and you via email. And I'll get you on. I'll send out some dates because I'd like to have you on in September.
Sounds good.
Thanks, buddy.
Thanks, dude.
Thanks.
All right, where were we with
To
our questions?
anybody, I have the spot. I have the spot here, and anybody who is serious, follow up with Craig and put pressure on him so he will put together a good program to help more companies get prepared to submit their letter of support applications, because I think he could add a lot of value there. Okay, we answered that last one. It's a separate application. How do you best prepare to get the letter of support, Bob? So it's a good question. It really depends, right? So it depends. Are you applying to incubators? Are you applying to angels? Are you applying to venture funds? The best thing I recommend is reach out to Greg, ask for his help. He'll help you with the business plan, pitch decks, even just evaluating whether it's a good option or not, you know, stuff like that. I recommend reaching out to Craig.
I'll tell you right now. I'm going to put my email right in here. If 5 people email me about this, I'll set up a group session for everyone, and then we'll go from there and see what I can do to help everyone. So if 5 of you are interested, let's do this.
Let's do it, folks. Okay, right. Does the incubator accept startup on idea stage with a strong business plan? I don't know. From what Craig said, it would definitely be an uphill battle because they're looking for some semblance of revenue and or traction. Some of them might, right? But I'm assuming it probably depends on the incubator. And if there is no revenue, I would assume everything else has to be very, very strong. Craig, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would think that means you still have to prove you got a revenue at home, you have a business. So usually if you're starting something new, you have a business that sustains you. You've been a serial entrepreneur, that kind of thing. So you're maybe proving the marketplace. So that way you probably want to go after the investor route, right? So you need a great pitch deck. You need a great, because if people understand you're going after the market, talking to people like NACO and like Stuart to pitch, because now if you get investment, then accelerators and incubators will take you because now you've got some stuff behind you. Now accelerators and incubators will take you. I have to look at those lists to see which ones are idea stage incubators, but most of them are looking for a significant amount of money. Like I said, I start adding these up. There's 3-step program for the one I'm looking at here now, which adds up to about 20,000 US. So you really need to be ready to pay for that. The visa program you said is like $13,000-$15,000. So yeah, the business doesn't necessarily have to be running, but you have to prove that you can do it, and that you either got investment. And usually it's investment under that circumstance. If you're coming here, if you have a Canadian investor, then they'll help you clear that way.
Okay, cool. If I apply for work permit, okay, that was answered. That's a duplicate. If I took diploma courses for Canada, then my spouse can come with me. Yeah, so Manesh, if you come on a study permit, you can include a spouse. So in most cases, study permit or work permit or PR applications, you can include your spouse in the application as well. Okay, that's another duplicate question. I am not looking for investment from incubator or venture capital at initial stage. I want my idea to accept by incubator. I want to make it successful.
Well, the
Yeah, that
question, yeah, go ahead.
well, yeah, as Greg kind of just alluded to, that might be difficult, right? So you're either going to need some form of financial investment to show that you have the support, or if your idea stage company can't get an approval from an incubator, you might be in a tough spot.
Yeah, and I understand you may not be looking for investment, and that's great. Um, can you invest by self for the initial stage? So it sounds like they've got a significant amount of money. They want to come here. If is there another way outside the startup visa for them just to come here and start a business?
Yeah, so there's a few entrepreneurial routes as well beyond the startup visa. So for example, for high net worth individuals, like if you're worth multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars Canadian, you can look into things like different PNP nomination programs for investors or entrepreneurs. You could look at an owner operator LMIA, which is basically, proving you can start a business in Canada because of prior experience and stuff like that. So for that stuff, I would say reach out. I personally don't do those, but I do work with a lawyer who does, so I could send people her way as well. Is there an estimated period of time that the business should be running, showing revenue? So again, kind of Craig touched on it a little bit too, right? They're not looking for like a specific number, and it will depend on the incubator and the whether you're going to investors or not. Greg, do you have any thoughts on that?
Um, I don't honestly. I think it really depends on the idea, what your margins look like. You might be starting something new. So now they're evaluating, like you're saying, the new business plan. If you have the money, then and they're not worried about it, they're evaluating your business idea. Then they're going to be looking at: are you financially stable to get 6 months, 7, 8 months? What's your business plan look like? Can you hire and get to that point? So um, it depends where you are. If you need to
Mm-hmm.
prove either you've got the revenue and have the past, or that you can afford to make a good go of it, and you're not going to, end up in Canada broke and with no business. Is what they want. They want a successful business, or you've got enough money that you're not. It's not going to be a problem for you. So those are the types of things you have to think about. Does that make
Okay,
sense?
awesome. Yeah, I think we caught up on all the Q&A questions. I was going to scroll up to see if there were any questions.
I th-
Tu-tu-tu.
I think you did this one already, but maybe if I apply for the work permit, on startup visa and then come to Canada, then for PR I have to apply separate. Oh, you already touched that one.
Yeah,
So
so each founder does have to submit their application, but they're separate. They will actually all be evaluated together and at the same time, but they are separate applications.
so what
Winston says, are the fees and funds all in Canadian dollars? Yes, they're all listed in CAD.
um what happens if, say, there's three co-founders and one doesn't have all the requirements?
Well, it's a good question because if it's still a qualifying business, then let me take a step back here. There's multiple reasons for someone to get rejected, right? It could be they didn't provide all the requested documents, or it could be something like they're inadmissible, right? So in Canada, if you have a criminal history, if you have poor medical history, you could be found inadmissible. So if, let's say there's four founders, three of them fill out everything, everything's great, and then there's one founder who has a criminal history. I'm not actually 100% sure whether they would reject all four applications. I have a feeling if it's a qualifying business, they might approve the three founders and just reject the fourth. But my assumption is that it probably depends on the reason for refusal. If the business is still legitimate and there's multiple founders that meet all the requirements, I would hope that they would approve the ones that do meet the requirements and only reject the one that doesn't. But again, it will really depend on the reason for refusal. Like if the reason for refusal is it's not a qualifying business, they would probably reject the entire application.
And we've got a couple more questions here about They're trying to avoid the risk and they want to get accepted. Same incubator. Email me, Craig at TorontoStarts.com. I'll put in there. I'll connect you with a few of the programs here so you can start talking to them directly. So really all you need is acceptance. So start figuring out what you need from them and what your chances are. And if I get enough people emailing me about this, I'll put a group together and I'll try and get a couple of people who like Stuart or other people who actually have some final say on some of these to give you advice. So message me and we'll see if we can get a group around that. What's this anonymous?
What happens if one of the co-founders that was originally on a letter of support decides not to come to Canada? Can letter of support be refiled without him? Well, anonymous, it's so weird when you don't have the name. I'm not sure what you're asking, because you only get the letter of support once you're accepted. And so then you would apply for PR. So I'm not sure what you mean by refiled without him. Maybe your question is, you get 4 members on the letter of support and then not all 4 want to apply for PR. Maybe that's what your question is. In that case, I would have the designated entity just update the letter of support, only including the founders that are actually applying for PR. Because if you have 4 founders listed on the letter and only 3 founders submit a PR application, then they may not process your application. Because in most cases, they wait for all founders to submit their application before processing each and all of them. And that's the thing, that you can just go back to the entity and just say, hey, can you please update our letter of support because one of our members is no longer interested in applying. That would be important though, again, because IRCC, when they get a letter of support and it shows however many founders are on that list, I believe it says on their website, they will not process the application, any of the applications, until all of the founders have submitted them. So you want to make sure that everybody mentioned on that letter of support will be submitting an application.
Okay. I don't know if you want to share your email. We've had a couple of requests here.
Yeah, I'll put here's the thing. If you sign up for Visto for free, you get an email from me automatically. My email is just josh@visto.ai. So you see the URL here. If you sign up for Visto, you'll get an automatic email from me as well. So that's the easiest way to get my email. And he's just based on your questions though, which are around getting the letter of support. Currently, Visto doesn't help with the letter of support, right? So we help on the immigration side. So if you're curious about letter of support stuff, I highly recommend getting in touch with Craig. We're also going to be working together to create even more resources, because a lot of the immigration stuff, until you get the letter of support, is to be honest, not really worth working on unless you want to go down a different immigration path.
Do you have a sample or template of how this letter of support looks like? Or
Well, those come from the entities.
That's what
right?
I figured. Yep.
Yeah, so those will come from the entities.
Okay, there we go. There we go. I'll email you, send you an email after session. Okay, I think we've answered everybody's question. If we're going to give you a couple of more minutes. So, Josh, we've covered a lot of stuff. Can you tell us a little bit about, just one more time, all the different visa stuff you cover on Visto.ai?
Yeah, so we wanted to build a portal so that someone from outside of Canada could figure out which application is the best fit for them, right? Because one of the hardest things to figure out if you're outside of the country is, what program do I go down? So we focus on most of the very, very popular applications. So study permit, work permit, express entry, which is the skilled worker PR program, and now the startup visa. So if you sign up for free at Visto.ai, you can learn about all 4 of them. You can book a chat if you want to chat with me as well. I do paid consultations, 30 and 60-minute blocks. All the prices are right in the portal. You can book them right in there as well.
And we do have a couple of quick questions here. The workflow for the Startup Visa app in Visto, it's the same for the other visa options?
The workflow for Startup Visa app.
Yeah, I'm not really sure.
I'm not really sure, Juan, what you mean by workflow, but basically what we have are guides. So you can, like you'll see on the menu on the left, our menu is broken down by visa type. So you can click Startup Visa, and then you'll see a guide on how to check if you're eligible and then prepare your documents for the startup visa. If you want to check the study permit, you click the study permit tab, and it'll take you to our guide on what you need to be eligible and how to apply for the study permit.
Great. And he mentioned, is it possible after getting your PR to ask for your parents or any employee that is important to your operation?
Well, those are two very different questions. So number one, I believe the parent program might be closed right now. So sponsoring your parents is very different from sponsoring an employee. So as a company, you can apply for what's called an LMIA to be able to sponsor other workers to bring them in on work permits. That is a program that has been and likely always will be running. To sponsor your parents, I'm not 100% sure if the program is opened. That kind of comes in and out. Sometimes the parent sponsorship programs open and close. So that will depend on timing. And you can just Google that, right? Just sponsor Parents Canada and just make sure you're going to the canada.ca or the CIC website.
So what if one of the founders doesn't want to move to Canada but wants to stay at home in the home country to continue operations?
Well, then I would not include them in the application unless, I mean, you can apply for PR and go and land in Canada and then go back home. But if they have no intention on coming to Canada, then I would exclude them from the PR application, right? Because if they don't want to move to Canada, they have to pay, right? They still have to pay the government filing fees, $2,000. They have to prove they have at least $13,000 in savings. They're going to have to fill out a bunch of forms and stuff like that. So if there's a founder that does not want to move, I would just take them out of the application process. Should not affect the rest of the founders, assuming there's a good reason. Hey, this person wants to stay at home, or they want to manage the operations back home. That's totally fine. Don't include them in the application if they don't actually want to move.
Do we have time to detail what express entry involves?
That's a big question. I mean, Express Entry it's a points-based PR program. Sign up for Visto.ai. We walk you through the whole thing. Express Entry it's not complicated, but it has more steps to it than most other applications. So it involves calculating a score, creating a profile, getting an invitation, improving your score if needed. But it's all outlined for free on the Visto portal.
And if I came to Canada on my intra-company transfer with my family, later, can I change this and apply for PR?
Well, an intra-company transfer is a work permit. Work permit is different from PR. So when you're in Canada on a work permit, you can always apply for PR if you're eligible and or if you have high enough points for express entry. So you can come to Canada on an intra-company transfer work permit, assuming that you're eligible for the intra-company transfer work permit. And then, yeah, you can apply for PR once you're in Canada or if you're eligible from back home as well.
Great. I think we got through them, and I'm glad we got that other bunch of questions in there. Thank you very much for taking the time today, Josh. Let's do this again next month with some more questions. Maybe get Stuart involved. He mentioned he was coming. He'd be interested in giving his insights on some of this, and a couple more people. Maybe do more of a roundtable. Thanks, everyone. Don't forget to email me. Let's get a group discussion going and help support you through this process. Thanks y'all for coming out, and all this stuff and upcoming events are at TorontoStarts.com/events, and don't forget to sign up for free at www.visto.ai. Thanks everyone.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks everyone for tuning in.